Salam and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Muslim Network TV is always there 24/7. We're on Galaxy 19 satellite covering the whole USA, Canada, and Mexico, coast to coast, north to south, and also Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku. You can download our app on your iPhone or Android, or check us on our website. You can also, if you're into watching everything on YouTube, you can find our channel there, but do remember to subscribe. Today we'll be talking about politics again. That's dominant as former President Trump's his trial is coming closer. He has difficulty looking for who is going to represent him and defend him. At the same time, the Republican Party is swinging between itself and President Trump, while President Biden keeps signing executive order after executive order. So we will have a political scientist from Canada with keen eye on the American political scene to help us discuss where Republican Party is heading. And that's Professor Robert Saldin. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Professor.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. Professor Robert Saldin is Director of Mansfield Ethics and Political Affairs Program and Professor of Political Science at the University of Montana. Tell us, where are you based, in US or Canada?
I'm in Missoula, Montana.
Okay, all right. So your insight about Montana politics is substantial there. Were you born and raised there?
I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. Moved to Boise, Idaho when I was 1. Grew up in Boise. Then spent a lot of years on the East Coast before coming back out west here to Montana. I've been here for about 12 years.
All right. Well, I was for some reason I thought you were a Canadian, and I think, well, a Canadian with such a deep insight into the party and especially Montana. Okay, so now that figures. So tell me,
I'm not far from Canada. We aren't far from the border here, and in fact, in normal times when there's not a pandemic on, I go skiing up in a little town called Whitefish, and lots of Canadians come down. So there is a bit of a cross-border thing, at least when the border is open.
And winter is not that harsh, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's pretty harsh, but pretty mild compared to what you all have going on out in your neck of the woods these days.
Well, I got 2 feet of snow right here, but not good enough skiing on the flat land here.
Right.
Tell me, despite the bad news about President Trump and all that, don't you think Republican Party did pretty good? 74 million votes, increased seats in the House, and almost retained Senate.
Well, right. Just from an electoral standpoint, I think the election back in November, if you take out the presidency piece of it, it went pretty well for Republicans, and I think that came as a big surprise to a lot of Americans, a lot of people who study American politics, like myself. That election, and of course the polls were telling us this ahead of time, and we've had all kinds of polling issues here for a number of years in the United States. But I think everyone was expecting a much bigger Democratic victory, and of course Joe Biden won at the top. But on down below that, as you say, at the House level, at the Senate level, it was not nearly as good a night for Democrats as a lot of people expected, and it does raise the question of looking to the future. That the Republican Party, which a lot of people kind of thought Trump might be in in the process of destroying or at least weakening significantly. Well, if you look at the actual returns, the number of people who voted for Republican candidates, it looks like the party, at least in an electoral standpoint, is doing okay, despite everything.
So what happened? Why the pundits and the polls went wrong?
Well, that is a great question. And that's been an issue, not just this year or last year rather, but for a number of years. And there are a few different ideas out there, and they aren't mutually exclusive. But one big thing, which just has to do with polling in general, is I don't know about you, but I get a lot of spam calls on my phone, and so I basically don't answer my phone unless I know who it is that's calling me on the other line. Well, for traditional polls that are done by phone, that's a huge problem if people just aren't picking up their phone anymore. And if the types of people who aren't picking up their phone are correlated with political views, right? Like if maybe people with families and who are working jobs are less likely to pick up their phone than someone who's living by themselves and doesn't have a job. Well, we know those things are correlated with political views. So that's a big problem. That's going to bias your results. The other, and so there are those kind of just systematic things that are a problem for polling in general. When it comes to polling politics specifically, another idea out there is that of the so-called shy Trump voter. That is the person who supports President Trump, is going to vote for President Trump, but maybe isn't eager to tell that to a pollster, or who sees pollsters and polls in general as part of the elite media. And of course, Trump rails against the elites. And so, and the whole fake media thing and all that. And so those people are just very reluctant to respond to polls. So, I think those are the best two theories out there about why the polling has had these problems, not only in 2020, but 2016 as well.
So, I mean, a whole lot of marketing, not just politics, but a whole lot of marketing depends on polling. Isn't that a kick in the gut of these companies?
Yeah, it's a concern. And on that front, I think it's a bigger concern. Some of those that first set of dynamics I was talking about. People just refusing to participate, or not picking up the phone when a pollster is calling. And this has been an increasing problem for a number of years. And there are some ways that pollsters try to deal with that, right? They weight their samples. So that is, if they know that the demographic they're looking for, if they expect a response rate of the population that they're interested in that's contains X percent of people between the age of this and that, and they don't have that many respondents in their sample, well, they can adjust those and wait for those, right? To bump up the level of the people that they expect in the population. But that's not a perfect thing. And polling, I think you can say, is almost as much of a art as a science. And some of these assumptions by the pollsters about what the population is going to look like, that leads them to go through these processes of adjusting the results to accord with reality. But again, the farther you get away from just having people pick up the phone with a reasonable degree of people who are doing that, the harder it is to get a reliable result. And right now, I mean, pollsters have to make sometimes hundreds of phone calls just to get a few people to respond to the poll, right? And so those response rates have been declining, and yeah, it's a big problem for the polling industry. I know people are working on that and thinking about ways to reach people through other means, be that the internet and email and text, and there are all kinds of ideas. But look, at the end of the day, if people aren't responding to the poll, right? If you have to go out there and make hundreds and hundreds of calls just to get a few responses, right? That is just inevitably going to screw up the results of your poll.
So, what is, if polls are messing up, what has been guiding Trump's head? I mean, he's not definitely guided by these polls. So, how is he thinking free from the polls? And what does it tell to the future politician that, they can rely on their head, their instinct, or their guts, or whatever it is, much more than polls?
Right. Well, I think in some respects it would be healthy for our politics to get away from obsessively watching the polls all of the time. That can be a problem too, where you're just constantly looking to the polls and acting like a weather vane, and following the polls. I mean, that's not necessarily an ideal way to run a democracy either. But you're certainly right that Trump, I think, was less obsessed with the polls in a certain way, at least in the sense of like, well, he's going to adjust what he does based on the polls. I think what he used as something like other presidents have used polls were those rallies of his. And by all accounts, he loved doing the MAGA rallies, and I think that's where he kind of took his feeling thermometer of the public. Right? It's like, well, and you can see this at his rallies, and I went to 5 of them, and you can kind of see he'll test out lines and see which ones get the biggest response and the best applause. And so he used those MAGA rallies as a kind of way, as almost an alternative to the polls in terms of getting a sense for what at least his people liked. Of course, the people who go to a Trump rally are very different from your average American. But he was able, I think, to use those rallies as an alternative to polling. And that was the crowd, that was the group of people that he was interested in connecting with, and that does make him stand out a little bit from most American presidents, who at least on some level wanted to reach out to all Americans, or at least kind of give off the rhetorical vibes that they were at least trying to do that. Trump didn't care about that as much. He was oriented towards his own base of support, and especially the people who would show up to his rallies.
Well, it is good to know that Trump rallies allow professors to enter, because the stereotypical image which media has is that his supporters are not intellectually very high. Did you feel that way while being in those rallies?
Well, so I should tell you, so 4 of the 5 that I went to, I went as a media person, which means you're kind of confined to this pen. It's all kind of roped off, and they don't like you to leave and walk around. So I wasn't mixing as freely as I might if I just went on my own. But one of them I did just go as a member of the public. And so you do get a feel for these things. And the one that sticks out most in my mind was the first one I went to. And at that one, and for these things, for the Secret Service and everything, you got to show up, hours ahead of time. And so there's a lot of downtime, kind of milling about. And I was kind of surprised the first one I went to. I'm not sure what I initially expected, but I was surprised at how energized the crowd was, and what a positive, kind of a positive patriotic vibe there was. The patriotism was, of course, a little over the top, but that's okay. But people were having fun. But then, as the initial speakers came out, and then especially with Trump himself, the mood did turn a lot more angry. And it was kind of fascinating to watch that play out over the course of a couple hours. And by the end of it, I happened to be sitting in the media pen right next to Jim Acosta, and Jim Acosta is the CNN White House correspondent, or at least he was during the Trump administration. I'm not sure if he still has that with Biden, but he was one of the real lightning rods. And Trump would often go after him during the rallies. Well, I was sitting right next to him, and at the end of the rally, a lot of people, a lot of the just regular attendees, came up to the barricade for the media area, and were just, yelling at him and the media in general. But there was a real change in tone, and yeah, I got to say, it was a little unnerving. It was disturbing. It wasn't anything where I ever felt unsafe exactly, but it was really interesting, I guess, just as an academic, to watch that dynamic change over the course of a couple hours from a kind of good, happy, enthusiastic vibe to one that at least for some number of the attendees took on a real kind of nasty edge.
Well, that's the power of President Trump. That's what he has done. We will talk a little more. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back after these messages.
My wife, she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it and spread the word, because the wisdom is there, so I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Professor Saldin. You just were mentioning about your participation And I cannot stop but see the resemblance. People who went to Capitol Hill, they were also, initially it looked like they were partying or something, taking photos and the selfies and enthusiastic, except when the madness came into being, once they were inside and attacking and all that. So it seems that it simply mimicked the behavior in the Trump rally, that they were calm, collected, enjoying themselves, enthusiastic. But when they got the messaging, that messaging turned them into anger. And you saw a little bit sitting to the CNN area, how they were hostile towards media itself. Now, that hostility may not have come by watching CNN. It came by President Trump translating what he thinks about that. So, do you think the era of charismatic politics is going to stay there? Biden definitely doesn't belong to that category, but if Republican Party, their House Minority Leader, who had some word and some blame on President Trump, goes back to his house and tries to make up. So, do you think Republican Party is seeing its future in a charismatic leader, Trump, and besides that, they don't see themselves successful?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question, and it's a big question. But the way I kind of tend to think about these things, and again, I'm kind of an academic, so my
here we don't penalize against academics.
Right. Well, thank you for that. But I was just saying, my approach to these things might be slightly different than your average American citizen. But from my viewpoint, we have in the American political system a party system within that, and that party system is a two-party system, and we need to have two responsible parties. And so I think that all Americans.
The fact of the matter that the president essentially becomes the leader of the party, and in this case, a retired president is leader of the party, is also the type of party system we have. It's not nothing like other countries where the party leadership is structure and administration is independent and well established as compared to these political leader.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And in our system, it's essential that we have two responsible parties that are committed to the norms and the institutions of American democracy. It doesn't do anyone any good to have one of two parties committed to democracy. You got to have both parties at least playing by some of the same ground rules. And so, I think everyone, certainly in the United States, but I think everyone in the world, certainly just north of us, up in Canada, should be concerned about this as well. We need and we want a healthy Republican Party. And so I think the future of the Republican Party is one of the enormous questions hanging over American society right now. And you're entirely correct to suggest that it seems as though Trump still has this hold over the party. Some of the days immediately following the riot at the Capitol on the 6th of January looked pretty promising, as you kind of suggest. Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader in the House of Representatives, and Mitch McConnell, the majority, or now he's the minority leader in the Senate, the Republican leader, they and a number of prominent Republicans were suggesting, I think quite rightly, that President Trump had some significant responsibility for what happened on the 6th. But what you have seen in the last week or 10 days is that they have backed off that quite a lot. And there have been a couple important votes. The impeachment vote in the House of Representatives, right? 10 Republicans voted for impeachment. Now, that's historically relative to other impeachments. We've had 3 previous impeachments, one of which was also President Trump's. But 10 is a pretty good number. But on the other hand, given what happened and given how clear the events and the facts were surrounding that, I think I certainly might have thought that there would be more Republicans who would have gone along with that. And then in a Senate vote just last week, there were only 5 Republicans who voted that the trial, the impeachment trial, should proceed. Right, all the other Republicans voted that it was unconstitutional. So that tells you a little bit about where the Republican Party is. I think a number of them were kind of dancing around, toying around with the idea of trying to move beyond Trump, but now here they are, back in the fold. And look, I think what ultimately is at the root of all this is the Trump base, the voters, right? We sometimes think of our elected officials as leaders who are leading the people, but often as not, they're trailing along, following the people. And it's pretty clear that even after the 6th, there are a lot of Americans who still support President Trump and who will go after people who openly oppose President Trump. And in fact, it's the Republicans who oppose President Trump who are number 1 on the target list. And we already see some of those people some of the Republicans who voted for impeachment, right? Well, they are under threat of getting primaried. That is having a Republican challenger, a Trump challenger, in their next primary to try to take them out the next time they're up for election. So, I think at least from my standpoint, the initial signs from the Republican Party looked relatively positive, but now we see a lot of those figures running back and trying to stay in the good graces of President Trump and President Trump's supporters.
So how President Trump at this moment is able to communicate with his Republican base that they continue to support his policies, or he has given them a set of ideas people believe in, and they no longer need to hear from former President Trump. For example, rules of, what you're saying, the certain accepted rules by both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democratic Party both accept. Well, those rules are developed by the deep state. What do you say to that? And the other pillar of democracy institution, say Congress. And Congress, each of the congressperson being harassed and threatened. Other pillar being the media. And media, you were sitting with the CNN guy and you saw what it is coming. So he has given certain tools which have empowered masses with the level of skepticism, a spice of conspiracies, and at the top of skepticism about the check and balance on the democracy, which could come from the media. So in that way, don't you think the basis of democracy itself are shaken at this moment?
Absolutely. Certainly in my lifetime, and I would suggest going back quite a lot longer than that, American democracy has never been in this bad of a situation. So, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned a lot of things there. I would say one thing that kind of binds all of those items together is this kind of populism, and that is this mentality that basically we can think about American society in terms of the elites and the masses. And this is something that has kind of run through American politics for a long, long time. But this kind of sense that the elites are in charge and they are trying to do harm or at least they're trying to do harm to the people, or at least are so selfish and obsessed on improving their own situation that they let the people suffer. And I think that's what feeds the whole deep state business, the idea of the fake media, and the elite of the Republican Party. And this is something that is not just a Republican thing or a conservative thing, right? They're left-wing variants of this too, right? It's this kind of powerful thread that has, again, run through American political history, and Trump kind of latched onto that and has ridden that quite effectively. I think a little bit of populism, I think, is not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't have to be. It's not inherently an unhealthy thing, but I think that's been taken way too far now, and you see it now. Involving all these insane conspiracy theories, the whole QAnon business. If you've followed that, I mean, really some outrageous and outlandish things that are just detached from reality. But I think there's a part of human nature that makes a certain number of people gravitate towards these things, gravitate towards demagogic leaders. Who will flatter the people and manipulate them, and I think you just look at the number of people who believe that our election back in November was fraudulent at a massive scale. It's not true, and it's been disproven. Every time anyone has looked at the facts, and yet there are still a number of, my fellow Americans who look at that situation and say the election was stolen. It's a big problem.
Well, what are the things which you think President Biden, who is a pretty centrist guy, he could be described as that typical elite, although he may not have gone to Ivy School. And the Democratic Party can do to restore what you think is extremely important for the democracy. That is a Republican Party which agrees to certain rules. Because once you abandon rules, democracy is what? Democracy is people's right to choose, vote, and make decisions, a participation from all, and its rules are electoral rules. What is a fair election? What is a non-fair election? And all that. And Democrats and Republican officials are watching, and they're certifying, and people move forward. Okay, we'll see you in 2 years if we can vote you out. If the rules are completely questions and people don't agree to the rules, then there is a risk to democracy. And here's President Biden, who wants to have a democracy summit of the world, while democracy itself is questioned to its core in our country. So what are we'll take a short break. When we come back, I want to ask you, as a political scientist, as a academician, who even take time and trouble to attend rallies of Trump to understand the phenomena. What are your 5 recommendations, or maybe 3 recommendations, which are not just the strengthening Democratic Party, but which can strengthen democracy in our own country? You're watching Muslim Network TV, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Adam. You remember me? I appeared in so many episodes that Sound Vision has put on the market. No matter what. Hey, what's happening? Hey, oh, sorry. Lockdown is what it is. Well, continuing here, in this lockdown, Sound Vision never stops thinking about you, the viewer. We'll have to get back into production again, online and inline. Everybody in their own space, even me. Although I'm stuck with Lanisa.
Salam! Salam! Salam!
I know, you were shocked too. Well, let me continue. This is what I was going to say. Salam! 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 Cut! 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 Finally, I get my own screen time again. Thank God. And so we invested in new equipment to bring you even better production with new songs and new singers and animations. Well, here are a few clips. And Sound Vision has brought all this into your home, making Islamic values and teachings easy. And if you know me, Adam, a multi-talented actor, well, sometimes I'm an actor and the reporter and the... Oh, that's enough. Let's move on to the next section. Well, you can watch these new episodes on our new app at www.adamsworldapp.com. We have previews happening every day on Muslim Network TV. Sound Vision has been serving generations, moving and changing with the times. We are all faithfully connected. That is a huge blessing. Your donation helps keep these programs available now and into the future. We take this job of helping tomorrow's Muslims today seriously, and you should too. Today, we need your help. Children absorb and learn from everything they encounter. Make that wholesome, positive, grounded in our faith. Together, we can accomplish our goal of raising better Muslims, better neighbors, and better citizens. Please donate generously. It's an investment in our future. But to finish, let me tell you, there are new scripts of my new mission. And it is something that I enjoy talking about. My new mission is space. Houston, we do not have a problem. Salam, see you soon.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Professor Robert Saldin. So tell me how America can strengthen democracy so that more citizens have a trust that this democracy is fair and they have a fair chance to win. And when they lose, there will be time they can win again.
Yeah, well, great question. A challenging one. I think, one thing to say at the beginning, and, I was talking about going to some Trump rallies earlier and how, things kind of started off feeling optimistic and positive, and then kind of over the course of the event, particularly when Trump came out and was doing his thing, that things increasingly took a real much more negative turn, and like to the point that after the event, a number of attendees were yelling and really angry and at the media, which is where I was for the event. That there is that for sure. And the people who stormed the Capitol and everything like that, that is a part of the Trump base, no doubt about it. It is not the entire Trump base, not even close. It's a minority, a vocal minority, a minority that should concern us, but it is not synonymous with all Trump supporters. And so, I think those people who were engaged in the things at the Capitol, I think trying to bring them back into the fold is might not be successful. Those people should be prosecuted for what they did and held to account. But your average person who voted for Trump, there are just a lot of reasons why people voted for Trump. And you and I might have our own thoughts about those and whether they're valid or not, but it doesn't mean that necessarily all those people support what went on January 6th, and certainly not that they would have joined in on that if they could. Still, it's alarming to me that there is more support for that than we would have thought. But still, it is really important to note that there are all kinds of shades and stripes of intensity within
all populist movement, all revolutionary things. There are, there is a support base, and then some of them are active, some of them are politically active, and some of them are at the level where the whole attackers of the Capitol Hill were. So shades of different things, but what unites them is the fake media. What unites them is the failure that President Trump was the elected leader. So I think the overall base has acquired an element of that ideology, if ideology could be called in that particular way, as compared to just people who acted out in a violent manner. So don't you think the broader acceptance is the one which is forcing the Republican elite, quote unquote, to sort of go back to President Trump instead of the principal Republican Party positioning?
Right, and to just put a little number on that, I think some of the polling out there, right, and we've already talked about how some of the polling is questionable, but there's quite a bit of polling out there so far that says something on the order of 70% of Republicans just out there in the mass public believe that the election was fraudulent, right? So yeah, that's concerning. And so, we shouldn't lose sight of that. That's absolutely why we see people in Congress, other Republican leaders who were kind of toying with the idea of dropping Trump and trying to move on, go running back to him because they look at their base of support, and their base of support likes Trump, and thinks that the election was stolen, right? So there we are. In terms of your initial question, trying to kind of reinforce American democracy, I think we as Americans, need to grapple with that fact that something like 70% of Republicans, again, think that the election was fraudulent. We have to figure out a way to bring those people back into the fold, right? There are too many of them to just dismiss them. And my hope, one of my hopes, is that Joe Biden can help be a leader in this. I think there is maybe no one better suited to that than Joe Biden. His whole track record, he was, as you know, he was in the Senate for decades and decades and decades, and then of course Obama's vice president. But his whole approach is to try to bring people together, to try to work across party lines, to try to work with Republicans. He has, I think, a genuine friendship with Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate. And so I'm not entirely convinced that the situation is salvageable, at least in the short or medium term. But if it is, I think Biden is uniquely suited to try to do that. And then, I would say the other thing that on some level we're going to need are Republicans, Republican elected officials in Congress who are willing to step up and say, this is wrong. We repudiate it, and to be real leaders. And there are a few of those people, but not nearly as many as I would have hoped.
Tell me, what do you think is the appeal of President Trump to minorities? I mean, larger share of Latinos, Black, and Muslim community. In Muslim community, 10% voted for him in 2016, and here is the Mr. Muslim ban president who got 30% of the vote this time. So, what is his appeal to minorities and also the Obama voters? I mean, the lady who got shot by the officer in the Capitol Hill when she was trying to climb through the window where the congressional leadership was there, who was shot dead. I mean, she was an Obama voter. Defending Obama did a lot of good things. So what was the President Trump's appeal, which took Republican Party or his voter base beyond the traditional base?
Well, yeah, no, that's a fascinating question, and I think you can look at the Black vote and see the same thing. I mean, he still lost the Black vote by a great deal, but he did better than he did 4 years ago, and did better than some of the previous Republican nominees did. And same with Hispanics, right? And despite all his rhetoric about rapists from Mexico and all of this, yeah, it's a fascinating question. I mean, my own view on this is that you can look at things according to demographic groups, and that's oftentimes helpful. But at the end of the day, we are all people, and we are prone to being pulled in the same way, right? So I guess to me, it's a human nature problem. There is something about us that gravitates towards demagogues, and that is what Trump is, and he's got it down to a T. And I mentioned going to these Trump rallies, right? And one thing that I'll tell you, going to the Trump rallies, it is in a way fun, right? They have music blasting for hours ahead of time. There's a sense of camaraderie amongst the people. I personally didn't feel that myself quite as much, but you can see it out there, right, when you're there. And so it provides people with a sense of belonging to something that's important. And I also sometimes think, having observed the Trump phenomenon from the very beginning, and including at these rallies, that for some people it almost also kind of comes to substitute for a religion, and that they come to try to get out of politics and out of the whole MAGA business, some of those things that traditionally people have looked to religion to get. And again, that kind of sense of belonging, of being a part of something that's bigger than yourself. All of those kinds of things, they are there in spades with Trump, and he is, and these are some of the things that demagogues always appeal to and use to manipulate people, to rally them, and to some degree that's part of politics in general. But Trump has managed to do that, I think, better than anyone I've observed in American politics.
Would you give him credit of being a good communicator? He was able to talk to people, and people were able to understand, and the media was unable to appreciate how great of a communicator President Trump was.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think you can't, you can't have lived through the last 5 years in the United States without acknowledging that Trump is amazingly skilled and good at what he does, and the communication piece, the way he connects with his base, the intense loyalty that he engenders in people. I mean, it is remarkable, and so I think it's clear that he's an amazing communicator. Now, the content of that communication, is deeply problematic. But just as a pure, like to stand back and to take all the content, put that to the side. His ability to communicate and to connect with people is unlike anything I've ever seen, and I think he just has an innate ability to do that. But it's also something that he's developed over time. And one of the things you hear is that he sometimes likes to watch TV with the volume off, right? And just looking at the way people carry themselves and behave, right? So nonverbal communication, and and trying to look strong and not weak, and all of these things. I mean, this is something he's practiced for decades and decades and decades, and is obsessed with. He's not obsessed with substantive policy, but he is obsessed with the communication piece.
And does show confidence. Didn't he say that he can shoot somebody in New York and still nobody will bother him, or something like that?
Right. He could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, and he wouldn't lose his supporters. I think people kind of took that as an exaggeration at the time. That was back during the 2016 campaign, as I recall.
Yeah.
But I think it might have been true.
Seems true. It seems true.
Yeah.
I mean, he got the whole one branch of the government attacked, and
Right.
people are still partisan on that. Let's talk a little bit on few minutes, which you have. You have this fascinating thesis about the how Democratic Party have lost rural areas, and you give example of your state, Montana, in there. Do you think the policy which flipped, Montana towards Republicans, and the Democratic organizing which flipped Georgia towards Democrats, show that both things are important? And do you think Democrats will be able to do that, Georgia job and other places, and Republicans will be able to duplicate the Montana job in other places?
Right. Well, so yeah, I think a couple things about our system that are important on this kind of urban-rural divide. And again, I live in a rural state, Montana. Georgia is has one of our huge cities, Atlanta, but of course has a lot of rural areas too. But one of the things that we've seen in American politics over the last few decades is that Republicans have done better and better and better in rural America, right? Outside of the cities. Democrats have increasingly done better and better and better in urban areas. And, you know, I think it's gotten to the point that it's not healthy for American politics, because a lot of our urban areas are so overwhelmingly Democrat and a lot of our rural areas are so overwhelmingly Republican. You know, it's better to have a little bit more of a healthy mix and not have things so rigidly divided by geography, right? I mean, this is, if you look back in American history, our Civil War, for instance, was fought on geographic lines, the North and the South. So, you know, I just worry about things when things get so polarized based on where you live according to geography. For Democrats, it's a concern too, because our system is biased towards rural areas. So our United States Senate, right? Every state gets 2 senators, right? It doesn't matter if you're from Montana, like I am, which is a very small state population-wise. We get 2 senators. So does California, our biggest state, right? And so there's this rural bias in the United States Senate that even when Republicans are well short of a national majority, they can still control the United States Senate. The Electoral College, the way we elect our presidents, which is very complicated, and I know a source of confusion and befuddlement for a lot of people who don't live in the United States. It's a source of confusion for a lot of people who live in the United States too. But that system also is slightly skewed towards rural states. And so if you're a Democrat, these are 2 significant institutional barriers towards gaining power. And so you can kind of run up the score in San Francisco and New York City and everything else, and win these popular votes nationwide for the presidency, as Hillary Clinton did in 2016 and as Joe Biden did this year. But still, it's not entirely clear that you're going to win the election, right? So all that is to say, this is a significant challenge, I think, for Democrats. It used to be, not that long ago, that Democrats did just fine in rural areas. And Republicans, to a somewhat lesser extent, did just fine in urban areas. But we have been moving away from that for some time. And you know, to me, that's one of the things that the Democrats need to do a much better job of going after those rural votes and at least being more competitive in rural areas, right? There's a big difference between, you know, losing a rural county in Montana by, say, 10 points and losing it by 50 points, right? And that's kind of what we've seen happen here in recent cycles, and not just here in Montana, but across rural America. And so I think it would be much better, certainly for the Democratic Party, but also better for our political system, for the health of our political system, if Democrats spend a little bit more time thinking about and trying to appeal to rural America, and also if Republicans were a little bit more competitive in some of our urban areas.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Robert Saldin. You have been very helpful in our conversation. Professor Robert Saldin is Director of Mansfield Ethics and Public Affairs Program and a Professor of Political Science at the University of Montana. Thank you so much. And thank you, Sherdil and Dr. Abdul Wahid, for producing today's show. And thank you for watching Muslim Network TV. We are always there on Galaxy 19 satellite, covering whole North America, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV. And you can download our app, Muslim Network TV, or our website, muslimnetwork.tv. Peace. Salam.